Hi, everyone. Glad to see those who have returned from yesterday and glad to welcome those who are joining us for the first time today. I'm going to give a little synopsis of where we were yesterday, just so you can catch on, since this will be a week-long intensive, each session building on the next. But first, let's arrive. Let's just breathe for a moment and tune in with a little song. Yai dai dai dai, yai da da dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Ya da da dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai da da dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 da 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. Yai dai 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 dai. With thanks to the Lenni Lenape people whose land I'm currently inhabiting, and with always welcome to our bright and benevolent ancestors, all of those who have turned the seasons, who have thawed and frozen and planted and sowed and reaped and all the rest of it. So grateful to be with you all today. Yesterday, we spent some time wondering about the source of inspiration and considering how do we create the conditions for seeds to be planted within us, for inspiration to arrive. We talked about the idea of catching a song, acknowledging that we don't write the song. We might write down the song, but that it originates somewhere else. And we connected it to the way that the outer world is mirrored in our inner world. The idea that well before we see a sprout, let alone a full bloom flower, so much happens, so much elemental work in the soil, with the sun and the rain, and all of the care in the garden or in the field. So too with us. Before that first song on the guitar, before that first painting, before that first article, before that Shabbat dinner, so much goes in, from the intention to the preparation to the hard work. And I want to build on that idea a little bit today, coming back to the outside world and thinking about how it is mirrored in our inner world. We're going to explore the concept of thawing. Anybody ever really think about thawing? I can tell you that annually, I think about thawing each time we have the conversation about when to take the turkey out of the freezer. Anybody ever make the mistake of waiting too long? Okay, so we talked about this a little bit yesterday. If you pour hot water on ice, that crackling sound, which indicates that the ice is not very happy. It turns out the turkey is also not very happy if you don't give it ample time to thaw. A couple of years ago, in pandemic time, we decided to have a small dinner on Turkey Day, my sister and my husband and I. And I figured not many people would be doing very, very much on this holiday, given the pandemic. So I asked my husband to go over to the store and to get a turkey suitable for 3 people. And so he calls me from the parking lot. He said, well, there's bad news and there's good news. The good news is there's an 18-wheeler trailer outside full of frozen turkeys. So we can get a turkey. The bad news is the smallest one will feed 12 people. So we're going back and forth and deciding, does it make sense to buy a turkey for 12? Could we take it across the street to our neighbors? How fast could we? We're back and forth, when suddenly my sister pipes up and says, you can stop having this conversation. Today's Wednesday. If you buy a frozen turkey today for 12 people, we won't be eating it until next Tuesday. So end the conversation there. And it was a moment not only of accepting what is, right? Making a plan B, but of remembering that not everything in this world is at our whim. That it's not as simple as showing up. It doesn't actually matter if you have a credit card and cash. You can't make the turkey thaw any faster than you can make the turkey thaw. And so too is true in the outside world. I've had the great privilege and honor of officiating many weddings and funerals. And sometimes people fret about what the weather will do when the time comes to be outside. And I always encourage that the feeling is real, but to consider how much energy are we exerting in resistance to a phenomenon that we have no control over whatsoever. Sometimes I've even observed that people's focus on the weather is a diversion from feeling the feeling of what's about to happen, whether it's a wedding or a funeral. Sometimes the intense emotion of a wedding can be enough to divert our attention to weather.com. So I'm inviting us to think about both the act of thawing and the pace of thawing today. So first, let's get specific about what we're talking about. To thaw means to become liquid or to become soft as a result of warming. Thawing is closely related to the concept of melting. And the word melt has its roots in Latin, in Greek, in Germanic, in Old English, and in Norse. Seemingly everywhere in the world where there's earth-based tradition, which is everywhere, there is a concept of melting. In Norse, the word is melta, which means to malt or to digest. And in Latin, the word is mollus, which means soft. So it gives us some clues about what's happening. Digestion is another natural process that even with lactate, we cannot hasten. We can assist it. We can create the conditions for good digestion, for the nutrients to be absorbed into our bodies, but we can only digest at the pace at which we digest. And so too with thawing. So this softening that occurs as the weather turns refers to ice in some places. Anybody still have ice or snow on the ground where you are? Okay, so for those folks, the thawing will be visible, the melting will be visible. For some of us, this has to do with the ground. I had a call last week. One of my project isn't quite the right word. I'll say one of my responsibilities is the co-management of a cemetery. And I got a call last week about a funeral, and they said the family really wants to have the burial tomorrow. And I said, is it possible? And they said, well, we went out with the shovel and the ground isn't going to allow it. So I said, okay, we'll have the funeral as soon as we can have the funeral, but of course the ground has to give way. And as the season turns, it's not a question. In a month's time, it won't be a question about whether the ground will allow for digging. So there's a softening that's happening in the ground, in the ice, the melting, the snow melting, but there's also what happens to us. Those folks who are in cold climates or have ever been in a cold climate, do you ever notice what happens in the split second before you open the front door in the winter? My body goes like this. Somehow I think that if I put my shoulders up and bring my arms in, it's going to keep me from feeling the frigid air outside. And what I notice over time is that if I brace myself for winter, I stay in that position for the whole winter, such that in the spring, I don't even realize that I'm braced for winter until I begin to unfurl into spring. So those who have to go out in the morning to take a puppy outside or meet a school bus or drive or commute or do all the things that we do through the course of the winter, we also kind of get tucked in this brace position. Or alternatively, sometimes we go into a period of dormancy. But either way, there's a seasonal shift that's happening. The winter hibernation I used to think was just for bears, until I started to pay attention to the way that behavior changes. Suddenly people want to be on Zoom more rather than gathering outside when we reach a certain temperature, rightfully so. And then the thaw comes and we start to peek our heads outside a little bit more, a little bit more. Now, it's ironic. I'm going to share what I wrote last night and then I'm going to tell you what happened this morning. When we wake naturally, there's a process of a slow awakening, and we reconnect with the outside world, we actually become aware of our awakenedness before we open our eyes or even move. Can you track that split second of awareness? I'm awake. Am I awake? Do I have to be awake? What time is it, right? There's that little something that happens. We might wiggle our toes or roll onto our side, slowly open our eyes to allow them to adjust to the light. My partner sits up in bed and folds himself over to stretch. Mid-40s, he can still do this. He stretches all the way, forehead to knees, for a couple of minutes. I sometimes sit on the side of the bed and do a few gentle exercises just to wake up all the joints. We have a morning meditation sit. We take care of our bodies, let the water warm before splashing it on our faces. My mouth wakes with the tingling of the toothpaste, and I begin to resalivate. We drink warm water with lemon juice. It lets our organs know that morning has come and primes them for digestion. We feed ourselves and dress ourselves and prepare for the day ahead. Here's what happened this morning. Well, here's what happened last night precedes what happened this morning. Last night, I was listening to a podcast as I was folding the laundry, and I was moving around, and so I had the volume all the way up on my phone. This morning, when my alarm went off, and my alarm is so gentle, I listen every morning, I hear the sound of Kirtan Rabbi Andrew Han's Shiviti waking me up. If you blast it at full volume, it's not a gentle wake up. I sat straight up in bed this morning. No stretch, no wiggle, no light adjustment. It was like, I'm awake. Okay, what's next? So much so that I had a hard time settling into my meditation after having just been asleep. Heart pounding. We all know the feeling, I assume, of oversleeping. Doing everything at double time, deciding which things to forego so we can get wherever we need to be. This is the equivalent of trying to quickly thaw the turkey or pouring hot water on the ice. Darshanit, Dr. Miriam Udell, who's a Maharat, wrote about Robert Frost's poem describing this phenomenon in nature. Here's what she writes. Robert Frost brings to life the pathos of this surrender in the poem Goodbye and Keep Cold, where a farmer frets over the manifold harms that might come to his orchard over the winter, rabbit and mouse, deer and grouse, while he must be away on business with different trees. Even more damaging to the fruit would be a sudden thaw. Robert Frost writes, no orchard's the worst for the wintriest storm. But one thing about it, it mustn't get warm. How often already you've had to be told, keep cold, young orchard, goodbye and keep cold. Dreaded 50 above, more than 50 below. Effectively, if the temperature rises too quickly, if we awaken and begin moving too quickly, we run the risk of damaging the fruit. What am I trying to say? In a short summary, it's vital that we move at right pace. When we talk about waking up naturally, we're effectively saying that we want to awaken at the pace of nature, the way that nature reawakens to a new season. So as we shift from winter, this season of inwardness, of sleep, of frozenness, into spring, the early part of spring, not the full bloom of spring, the early days of new growth and sprouts, we move at right pace. Mark mentioned yesterday how good it feels when the sunshine hits our skin. Can you remember that feeling? Some folks might be in a place where there's sunshine. I want to offer a little bit of nuance to this. The sunshine where I am right now is gorgeous. The sky is blue and it feels crisp. I've just given it away that I'm not in Pittsburgh. The feeling of sun on my skin feels like a gentle warming. and it's helping me thaw and soften. However, if you've spent any time in the tropics, what you'll know is that the sun has a different quality, and it can lead to burning our skin if we're not careful. It's maybe similar of putting heat on ice and not turning up the temperature slowly or modulating how much exposure we have to it. So we're going to sit today, and the invitation is to feel what is the right pace for your thaw. Rabbi Dorothy Richman, who is part of the IJS extended faculty, for lack of a better phrase, teaches B'Shem Amro, Rabbi Sheila Peltz-Weinberg, that in our sit, we notice things that come into our awareness and that we have the opportunity to include them. She teaches that including doesn't mean welcoming or accepting or loving everything that comes. And it also doesn't mean rejecting it or resisting it or pushing it away. Translation, you don't have to love that it's going to pour rain on your child's chuppah, but you also don't have to resist it. You could include it in the reality of what's happening and adjust accordingly. Jung teaches that what we resist persists. Anybody have that experience? Every day. And perhaps this is part of the reason why we practice, why we sit and we practice. So let's try. We're going to sit for about 18-ish minutes, and we'll be spacious. And then we'll come back and we can talk a little, and we'll say Kaddish and just be together. So I'm going to invite you to get comfortable. Settle into your seat or onto the floor or your bed or the sofa, wherever you might be. Feel in your body. Where is it contacting your seat? Feel the power of gravity holding us in place. The solidness of the foundational ground beneath you. Just take a deep breath into your belly. Before we go too deep, I'll invite you to see if you can get 10% more comfortable. Maybe releasing your neck or your shoulders. Letting your belly hang. Allowing your legs to be where they want to be. Notice the sensation of your clothing on your skin. Where is there softness? Where is there constriction? Where is there an itch? Just notice and see if you can include it. How does the air feel on your skin? How does the air feel in your nostrils? What is the temperature in your mouth? On your hands? On your feet? No need for anything to change, just noticing what is, allowing it to be included. I just come back to the breath and simply be. Noticing where is there ease in the body? Where is there tension? Where is there warm? Where is there cold? Just noticing and including, continuing to focus on the body sensations or on the breath. As we prepare to come back into this space, I'll invite you to slowly awaken from your meditative state. You might wiggle your toes or your fingers. You stretch a little. Open your eyes gently and allow them to focus. See if you can stay comfortable in your body. And we can continue the conversation after we pause to say Mourner's Kaddish. But before, I want to just invite you to notice, how do you feel? How does your body feel? And share that I had the experience when we began. I felt a little warm. I often do when I'm in front of a lot of people. And I couldn't really do much about it, but what I could do was take my slippers off and put my feet on the cold ground to ground me a little. But then, as I began to meditate and my nervous system calmed, suddenly my feet felt cold, and there was nothing I could do about it because I'm pretty sure I'm being live streamed, so I couldn't really get my slippers back on. And so I took my own instruction, which was to just notice the feeling of the cold on my feet. My brain was telling me, you don't like it when your feet are cold, make it stop. But when I was able to slow down and just notice, it was cold sensation. It didn't hurt. There was momentary discomfort. And then interestingly, the resistance to the cold melted away and allowed my feet to just be with the cold. Then, a few minutes later, a thought popped into my mind. You forgot to. No, not now. Thank you for reminding me. Just there, niggling. But if you don't do it right now, you're going to forget again. That message is there. And I just noticed it. And it too melted away. So maybe this happened to you as well. There was an itch or a thought or a body sensation that you were able to include, and the intensity of it backed off or melted. So in this day of thawing, we have living proof of what's going on internally, mirroring what's going on externally, and reminding us that if we allow things to move in their right time, nothing stays the same forever. Everything changes form. So perhaps that's a good segue. We'll pause for a moment and offer Mourner's Kaddish. I'm going to pass to you, Josh.
Okay. Thanks, Keshira. So if you need to leave us, invite you to come back tomorrow at the same time. But right now we're going to put up Mourner's Kaddish. If you'd like to put in the chat, you need to open up the chat, and anyone that you have in heart or mind that you're reciting Kaddish, as you're reciting Kaddish today, please feel welcome to put their name in the chat. And you're also welcome to unmute and join me in reciting Kaddish. Yitkadal,
Yitkadash Shmei Rabbah
Alma
Dira
Yamlich
Malchutei Chayechan Degimechan et Chayeko Israel Hagalav Zman Karim Amru Amen. Shmei Rabbah Baruch Barach Yishbar
Yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalam shmei v'kudshah bricha Leila min kol birchata v'shirata ushmechata v'nechamata v'aman Yehei Shlamu Rabba min Shemaya Chayim Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael Shalom B'Mroma
Shalom Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael Kol Yoshvei Tevel Amen. Amen.
All right. Thank you. So invite you to stay around for a few minutes now to share your experience and reflections and any questions that you have for Keshira on our practice together. If you need to leave, we look forward to having you back here when you can join us at 12:30 Eastern tomorrow or any other day. And wish you a tzeit shalom. Farewell. Keshira, thank you so much. I was so struck by how you were just relating to things all of us do by virtue of having bodies, right? I think I don't know about everybody else's waking up practice, how that goes for, but I think most of us could probably relate. Many of us could relate to, that moment when, am I still asleep? Am I awake yet? My mother often calls me at early in the morning, and she lives a mile away, but she'll call and she'll say, "So are you awake?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm talking to you." But just the way that all of us have this experience of thawing, and what I thought of actually is also, I thought of getting into bed at night and taking off my socks, right? And because we have pets and the socks get, lots of hair on them, and I don't want that getting in my bed. So I sleep without socks on. And I live in Chicago, so it's cold. And I think about, when I like trying to warm up my feet, or when I'm outside and, when my fingers get cold and I put them up to my neck to try to like warm them up, or you come in and you do the dishes and and your fingers are still cold and then the water's too hot. Just all of that, like, these gradual processes that like, there's no way to rush them. They just take time. And if you do them too quickly, you really feel it. I feel it anyway. So thank you. That was so, and someone wrote to me, I think the chat for everybody was disabled, but somebody just before we went to Kaddish wrote to me with a beautiful image of Pharaoh thawing his heart. Right? The idea of, in Pharaoh's heart doesn't get thawed. But we could imagine, like, what would that be like, to soften up, right? The process of softening up. So anyhow, those were all just, responses that it evoked in me.
As you're saying that, I'm realizing Pharaoh's heart is led by his resistance, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a softening and then a hardening, which also teaches us something about what happens when we resist or when we brace, and don't allow for that softening to happen. Josh, the first thing you said, this question, "Are you awake?" Well, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you, so I must be. Reminded me of a story. Reb Zalman's daughter, when she was 5 years old, asked him, "Abba, I know that you can wake up from a dream when you've been sleeping, but can you wake up from a dream when you're awake, when you're not sleeping?" Ooh. And so this idea of awakening, and the way that we gently bring ourselves more awake to the world around us, to the things that we pass by every day and don't even notice, and the gradual process of attuning to what's happening at right pace. I find that often I'll be having a conversation with my husband and he'll look at his watch and I can see out of the corner of my eye that New York Times has some breaking news. And I've learned to not hop on my phone immediately and Google what is the breaking news, because it's not a gentle awakening to what's happening in the wider world. That maybe I want to wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Usually somebody will summarize what the breaking news is, and I don't have to watch the live stream play by play of what's happening. Or I'll say to him, is it something I want to know about right now? Think about, how do we awaken? How do we integrate what's contrasted to our state of being in any given moment? We all know what it's like to receive something shocking news or to experience a feeling of shock. And it goes to work on our bodies and on our systems in a variety of ways.
As you're talking, first of all, Harris, thank you. This is a beautiful song by Batya Levin that's here, but it's going to take time. I was thinking also of these transition periods that we have built into our calendar. My practice, which is a traditional Shabbat practice, is that you light candles, 18 or 20 minutes before Shabbos actually begins, right before sunset. There's this intermediate time, and that Shabbat ends, depending on which tradition you follow, 42 minutes after sunset or some interval after sunset. And I think of that as like this transitional period that we need a time to be able to, wade in, and to wade out or wade into the next thing. And the sudden rupture, when Shabbat finally is over, or Shabbat finally enters, right? When Shabbat enters for me, like when it's officially Shabbos, like there is something that changes, right? And then for me, like I know now there are things that, it's done. My cooking is done, my preparation is done, my phone is plugged in, it's all away, like, okay, we're here. And then when I come out, I have a friend who, as part of, there's a wonderful practice called Malava Malka, right? That you accompany the queen, the Shabbos queen, on Saturday night, and you extend your Shabbos like even further. And so part of his Malava Malka is he doesn't check his phone, let's say Shabbat. He doesn't check his phone Saturday night. He waits till Sunday morning, right? And I think for those of us for whom, not using our phones is maybe at this point the biggest part of our Shabbos, there's that extension of like wanting to linger in it a little longer. So
Yes,
that evokes it for me. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, I love the holding on and the gentleness of return. I'm seeing Alan's comment in the chat.
Yeah.
Two images come to mind. And the second one that he writes is Tatsir Tsurura, this untangling of knots. And I have an image that always comes to my mind. I was a little kid with a heart on a chain, and I would put it into a jewelry box. And of course, when I would take it out, the chain would be all knotted, and I would be trying to pull. And my dad would take it in between two fingers and he would say, no, gently, you just gently move it together and the knots would untie. Maybe a metaphor, maybe not a metaphor, but this idea of untangling knots when we feel knotted up, same is true actually for the knots in my belly. As soon as somebody says to me, well, just relax, you can imagine how much good that does. But if I can ease my breathing and just let myself be, my breathing will often ease my body. If I can lie down, just breathe, maybe drink some warm tea or some warm water, be under a blanket. The knots will untangle. And this is similar to this idea of just moving in natural time, of not forcing things to be on our timeline, but allowing them to be on theirs.
It also just makes me think of one other thing is about, we're getting into the calendrical orbit of Pesach, it's approaching. And that's a place where we're dachuf, we actually, we eat bread that is defined as not giving it time, right? And part for those of us who bake challah, right? It's just like with the turkey. If you don't have enough time, you're not going to have risen dough, it's just there's something to think about that, both where sometimes, most of the time, we want to have that expansiveness. But also sometimes, as a facilitator or a teacher, I've learned the value of there are games, like gamifying certain things where you're like, okay, you've got 1 minute and then the bell rings and you got to make a decision, right? And there's a certain place where healthy pressure can also help us.
Yes.
Because the shadow side maybe of expansiveness is that we can also get a little slow and stuck and not feel a sense of needing to move, right?
Yes. Right pace and slow are not always the same thing. You got to know, what does it say? You got to go slow to go fast. That in our slowness, in our attunement, then we know when is it time to go quickly. I would never suggest to somebody that if the fire alarm is going off, that you should at right pace consider wearing socks and feeling your skin as you pull them on. Get out of the building, right? That's a moment to go fast. And as we said at the beginning of this session, your nervous system will act in accordance to your moving fast. I think the thing that underlies it is having the foundational practice to reset your nervous system once you're safely out of the building. I was having a little chuckle about the idea of matzah. Yes, we eat matzah and we got out in haste. Many of us have all kinds of practices that we do to support our bodies so we can eat the matzah for a week, right? We have to create the conditions to allow for that practice so that we can experience the significance of it while maintaining our humanity and while supporting our bodies. It's a wonder, all the different ways that we can move. And there is a time for every purpose. And I think for me, the trick is knowing when to move how, and then how to reset and come back to centeredness.
Judy had this lovely reflection in releasing and letting go of any meditation goal. I found myself rising into the air, carried by some large, quiet flying bird, and just looking at the clouds and the scenery and shapes below, but no want to land, not wanting to land, just to exist in the quiet non-specificity of the high view and surroundings. It's lovely. This bird that's circling and just taking it in. Beautiful. And thanks to Susan and Harris also for your comments. Beautiful. Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, I might, if it's okay, sing us out because it's nearly at the half hour. Tomorrow we will return and we will meditate on what happens when we thaw and the new feelings of the new season. I'm going to thank Harris for offering this song in the chat. I'm going to sing it to you a little bit as we go and bless you back into your day. With thanks to Batya Levine. Hey, you're doing okay. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take time. Hey, you're doing okay. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take time. The heart is a muscle contracting, expanding. Feel the waves and learn the lessons. Time. It's gonna take time. The heart is a muscle contracting, expanding. Feel the waves and learn the lessons. Time. It's gonna take time. Blessing you that you take the time that you need, moving at the pace that you need to move. And I'm excited to be back together again tomorrow. Josh, thanks for such beautiful hosting and conversation.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow or when we see you again soon.